sports, entertainment, architecture, the scale that you talk about is very, very, it's new to India, relatively speaking. And, I think getting an exposure to what the world is doing is really, really important. Similarly, when we do office buildings and stuff like that, the same thing comes true. So, we are living in a kind of a global culture.
Here in Australia, they are often used as public rejuvenation projects, and I've had the pleasure of working on them. A lot to do with essentially brownfield sites, reclamation of brownfield sites. The Hobart Stadium is exactly that. Industrial revolution, contaminated with oil tanks, and now it's being rejuvenated back into a place that we can use for the public good.
Hello everyone, my name is Pooja and I'm once again very delighted to welcome you all to VC Live Season 4, Episode 1. If you're joining us for the first time, VC Live is a monthly webinar series presented by Godrej Value Co-Creators Club, an initiative by Godrej Locks and Architectural Solutions. Through VC Live, we bring together leading voices from architecture and design for thought-provoking conversations on the ideas, processes, and perspectives shaping the built environment. We had a truly engaging Season 3 with meaningful conversations, diverse perspectives, and thought-provoking sessions that explored the future of architecture and design in many inspiring ways. And today, we are absolutely excited to build on that momentum as we begin a brand new season of VC Live. This season, we are taking the conversation deeper with our new theme, Beyond the Blueprint, a theme that reflects everything architecture truly is, not just form, not just visuals, but the ideas, intent, process, and lived impact behind every space we create. So welcome to VC Live Season 4, a season of deeper questions, stronger perspectives, and more meaningful conversations. GVCC is a growing community of architects and designers across India, brought together to exchange ideas, explore innovation, and champion thoughtful, people-first design. If you haven't joined the community yet, you can do so right now by clicking the link in the chat box. Let's take a moment to see what GVCC is all about.
Welcome to the Godrej Value Co-Creators Club, where innovation meets collaboration. GVCC is a unique platform for architects and interior designers to merge their creative visions with our innovative product offerings. We aim to cultivate a network of thought leaders, driving innovation and excellence in the industry. Celebrate your achievements with our GV's Awards, recognizing innovative projects across various verticals. Join our community through exhibition visits and masterclasses to stay updated on the latest trends and technologies. Enjoy exclusive access to new products, special discounts, and tours of our Mumbai and Goa plants. Join the Godrej Value Co-Creators Club today. Be part of a community that values innovation, collaboration, and sustainability.
Godrej Locks and Architectural Solutions, a trusted leader in home safety, continues to innovate through its latest campaign, Befikar Living Unlocked, featuring the next-gen Advantis IoT 9 digital lock, designed to address modern safety needs through smart technology. Let's take a quick look at the film.
Thrusters.
Check. Door lock check.
डोर लॉक घर का डोर लॉक किया था या भूल गया घर का लॉक फटाफट से चेक करके आऊं क्या
ले आइए गोदरेज IoT 9 डिजिटल लॉक 9 सिक्योर एक्सेस मोड्स, ऑटोमेटिक लॉकिंग ट्रिपल बोल्ट और कई एडवांस फीचर्स। अब घर के अंदर या बाहर रहो बेफिक्र।
घर जाते ही गोदरेज डिजिटल लॉक लगवाऊंगा।
VC Live is a monthly thought leadership series where we bring together industry leaders to explore the evolving future of architecture and design. And for Season 4, we are looking beyond the obvious. Beyond the Blueprint is about moving past drawings and final visuals to uncover the deeper thinking behind architecture, the intent, the process, the challenges, the decisions, and the way design is ultimately lived and experienced. This season is about understanding not just what was built, but why it was built that way and what kind of impact it creates over time. And we begin with a topic that sets the tone perfectly: building identity, not just infrastructure. This session begins with a powerful question: how can architecture go beyond utility and scale to create meaning, memory, and identity? In a world where buildings are often judged by speed, efficiency, and image, today's conversation reminds us that architecture also carries another responsibility: to shape experience, reflect context, and build a stronger sense of place. Across public venues, institutional projects, urban environments, and large scale developments, our speakers today will explore how architecture can do more than perform. It can represent, it can connect, and it can leave behind a lasting identity. We'll also have a moderated conversation, a quick rapid fire round, a live poll, and audience question and answer at the end. So please do keep sharing your questions in the Q&A tab as we go along. All right, let's begin by welcoming our first speaker. He's one of the preeminent international voices in sports and entertainment architecture, with more than 35 years of experience designing and delivering major sports and entertainment venues that create strong public experiences while also serving long-term civic and commercial value. Over the course of his career, he has involved in many of the most significant stadiums and arenas across Australia and New Zealand, including Alliance Stadium, Optus Stadium, Adelaide Oval, Rod Laver Arena, the Sydney Cricket Ground, and Eden Park. His work was also extended to venues and overlays for the Olympic Games, as well as the FIFA Cricket and Rugby World Cups. What makes his perspective especially relevant to today's theme is his ability to think of infrastructure not just a function, but as an experience. Something that brings people together, shapes public memory, and contributes to the identity of a city. Today, he will share his perspective on how large-scale architecture can move beyond performance and become a meaningful part of how communities connect with place. With such an amazing introduction, let's welcome architect Alastair Richardson. A warm welcome, sir.
Thank you, Pooja. Oops, let's get this working. There we go.
Hi.
Excellent. Thank you, Pooja. And yes, I have a presentation today to go through to show you some of the projects we've done, some that are on the drawing board at the moment, and some that are the future still to be delivered. In particular, at the end, talking about very quickly India and Ahmedabad for 2030 and the potential future bid for an Olympic Games. So if I share my screen,
Sure. Truly
hopefully
excited
you
about
can
your presentation,
all
by the way.
see my screen.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Excellent. Let me just go full screen. So thank you very much, everybody. So Cox Architecture are a design-focused architecture. We have over 600 staff, over 60 years of operating, and a part of our DNA has been public buildings, and in particular, sports buildings. We've won over 650 international and national awards, including, again, for sports projects, but also major cultural institutions such as museums, hospitals, mixed-use developments, educational projects as well. What makes us unique in sport is that each of these typologies influence the way that we approach our sports buildings and our entertainment buildings, particularly in relation to understanding the whole experiences and the experience economy of people as they go about their daily business, and also, of course, celebrate their team's performance or a concert. Our projects are varied and have been throughout the world, with extensive projects throughout the Middle East. And as I mentioned before, a lot of award-winning projects, but also civic projects are a core element of our work. With over 60 years as a practice and over 35 years myself individually as a leader in the sphere of sports architecture, the great thing about these buildings is they are the people's palaces. We often refer to them as the people's cathedral. Every one, however, needs to be unique. It needs to reflect on the community that it serves, the team that calls it home, and what its expression is to a global market, because quite often with global television, of course, this is the first snapshot that a venue or a city might have to a world audience. So I'm going to start with some approaches of how we deal with these contextual relationship and making every venue unique to its circumstance. This is the current stadium on the drawing board. It will be the world's first indoor cricket stadium, 30,000 seats, built on reclaimed land as a part of the old port of Hobart, Australia's second oldest city. It sits at the foothills of Mount Wellington and engages a CBD of, by our standard, and by your standards as well, a small city. It is only a city of 150,000 people. But the unique thing of this one was building the big sky, this amazing dome, 260 meters by 170 meters, with a timber and steel hybrid structure, which uses local Tasmanian timbers as a part of its structure to create this amazing indoor environment where cricket will be played essentially throughout the year, but in particular protecting it from the very harsh southerly winds that we get through here from Antarctica. So the idea was to create somewhere where the whole of community could come together, bask in the notion of uniqueness of Tasmania and Tasmania industry, and the visiting fans from around Australia and hopefully from a cricket perspective around the world get to enjoy this amazing stages, amazing events within this protected, enclosed environment, and yet with the sun still shining through. Throughout our work here in Australia in public work, the notion of how we deal with First Nations and Indigenous architecture is integral to our approach to contextualism. It allows us to inform every single building in a unique way by building on local culture and tradition of the First Nations people. And these elements have been brought through both landscape and the way that the architecture is actually read, creating stories and songlines that are reminiscent of the 65,000 years of Aboriginal culture that actually exists here in Australia. I'll now take you on a journey to some other ones. This is the Sydney Cricket Ground, and for you cricket fans out there, you'll certainly know the Sydney Cricket Ground. But next door, we've also recently completed the Sydney Football Stadium's reincarnation, a stadium that Cox designed originally over 35 years ago, which we replaced 5 years ago. And the new Sydney Sports Club, which is an integral part of the overall precinct, sat next to the Moore Park area, just on the fringe of the CBD in Sydney. The cricket ground itself, the new stands that we've done, the master plan, had to reflect and look at the issue of the original members' pavilion built in the 1850s and the ladies' pavilion in the 1880s. And so the ground was designed as a series of pavilions rather than a coliseum, allowing glimpses through into the parkland, but equally honoring and framing the existing heritage buildings that are such a long-lasting memory of cricket. Arguably, cricket buildings are as important as Lord's in London. The new Noble Bradman stand is the main members facility, directly located behind the wicket and the bowler's arm, designed as an element that is this great ceremony, celebration of cricket, this marquee for cricket during the summer months. And then also at Allianz Stadium, this element of this enclosure, the getting the crowd right on top of the action, but then the uniqueness of tying in the Sydney sandstone, the Sydney heritage, the notion of this is the oldest city within Australia, and bringing the warring factions and the crowds together into the new stadium. Every stadium we do tries and looks at a unique roof to create identity, to create coverage for everybody. And this roof weighs roughly 30 kilos per cubic meter, designed with Schleich-Bergmann out of Germany, as well as ACOM here in Australia. But you can see the patterning on the seat here, which again is this reference towards Indigenous culture, done by a First Nations artist representing the place that Sydney used to be and the beginning of tribes, of the bringing together of tribes in armed conflict in terms of the notion of how sport is played. The health club is an integral part of this, because when we talk about sport, obviously we have the elite, the notion of the top performers, but community sport is equally important. And here at the Sydney Health Club, the Sydney Sports Club associated with the stadium, every person can actually meet with their sporting heroes within the pool and the gym environment of the location. Back in 2017, we completed the new Optus Stadium, 60,000 seats, on the bank of the Swan River in Perth, WA. This was replacing essentially the Wacker, one of Australia's most famous cricket grounds, and had to be a unique ground from day one that reflected the aspirations of the people of Perth, but also gave a destination and a real focus for bringing acts and events to Perth. The new stadium was built on reclaimed land. We looked at issues of bringing the parkland back to life, of reinstigating the notion of over 50 years of degradation of the land to creating this vibrant park. We included bridges, connections to train stations, and this shimmering light that's so unique to Western Australia is picked up within this anodized aluminium facade that completely encloses the stadium. Stadiums are also a part of a digital experience. The stadium transforms itself at night into this lighting element that brings crowds together, creating stories, but are fans as well as the teams that call it home. And inside the Great Cauldron, getting people as close as possible, looking at over 60,000 with the ability to expand to 70,000 people there for a day's cricket, or whether it's a 2-hour football game of our version of Australian rules football. The next one I just thought again of a different approach was Adelaide Oval. Again, for your cricket aficionados, the home of Donald Bradman. This was set in a unique parkland setting on the edge of the CBD on the Torrens River, with each stand being there as a part of a unique setting and a unique pavilion, with the retention of over 200-year-old fig trees on the hill and standing on the hill behind. It also now integrates a hotel into the stadium, which is actually an occupancy of over 90% and one of the most popular hotels in Adelaide. And again, that sense of getting people as close to the action as possible, creating roof forms that reflect sound, that increase the intensity of the atmosphere, and yet equally providing everything from premium hospitality experiences to general public experiences across the ground. Wide open concourses continually allow people to engage with the game throughout the ability to essentially walk around like in a shopping mall with food and beverage options and food courts located all the way around. The next project, just to quickly show you this sort of typological evolution, was an earlier project from 2010, which was the Melbourne Football Stadium, dedicated for soccer, designed around a geodesic domes reflective of essentially soccer balls as a part of a unique structural system developed with Arup. Again, this unique structure creates an identity that is unique for it, particularly in a city that's mad about sports, but not the rectangular sports. This stadium had to create a sense of an icon, a landmark, and was very, very successful in that component. The shells, again, beginning to increase the atmosphere, the intensity of the atmosphere for fans watching, whether it's rugby or soccer games. Australia is such a vast country. Our climate ranges from the subtropics and the tropics all the way down to the cold, cool climate of Tasmania. This stadium in Townsville, which was completed 2 years ago, is actually up in the tropics. It's in Townsville on the Fitzroy River. Here, everything was about creating a sustainable outcome that encouraged the breezes into the ground, that was sustainable from a subtropical point of view of large terraces and open ends to the ground to encourage natural breezes. And again, a die-hard crowd that called this place home and sells the game out every time for 20,000, 30,000 people. And finally, as we run into showing you the recent work, this is literally off the drawing boards. Back in January, we were awarded the new Olympic Stadium for Brisbane 2032 Olympics. It will form the home for cricket and football, Australian rules football in the future. Set in a verdant park, the stadium is actually an integration of the park coming into the building with landscape terraces, open air in a subtropical environment with breezes being encouraged to flow through the building. Within walking distance of the CBD, it'll form the focus for the whole of the 2032 Olympics. With wide concourses, elevated bridges because of a very undulating topography, with lush tropical rainforests introduced around the stadium, breeze, soleil, forming the formation of the facades of the building with rammed earth walls, as well as elements of deep overhanging terraces and the removal of as much air conditioning in the building as possible. We're also engaged in the redevelopment of the MCG. It used to be the world's largest cricket ground, unfortunately, until, of course, Modi Stadium was built in Ahmedabad. But the new proposals on this will take it over to 105,000, with the Great Veranda, an Australian building typology, attached onto the southern stand to create new dining experiences and new hospitality experiences for this additional 60,000 stands. The element of getting everything closer together, new product mixes, sustaining the element of having a 50 to 75-year lifespan, a low embodied carbon outcome with the basis of actually having a new stand that is 40% less embodied carbon than the current stand. And finally, the work that we're doing in India, very differently again, on the banks of the river in Ahmedabad, the whole SVP Enclave Park, that has some 180 hectares of park. We're looking after the arena project and the new aquatic center project as a part of the BCC consortia with Collage Design from India and BDP in India. The new arena will be India's first arena. The design has been influenced heavily by the climatic response within Ahmedabad, with step terraces forming the podium of the building and landscape rising up, and then jali screens creating protection of the overall building from the intense heat, being integrated with essentially LED screens to create this landmark along the banks of the river. Whereas the aquatic center pulls up the Diwali sense of a lantern overhanging the swimming hall underneath this area, creating this glowing light building, again integrated into the landscape as a part of the swimming venue for the 2030 Commonwealth Games. And hopefully that's a very short snapshot of projects. I think I have my 15 minutes. As you can see, every project is different. Every project approaches these components in a different way to create a contextual response that is full of life and embodied in the process of the experience economy, but also the local culture. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing such amazing works, and of course, heartiest congratulations on such legendary spaces, and a warm welcome to India for creating such a space. So thank you very, very much. All right, let's move on and let's invite and welcome our next speaker for this session. He's an architect and urban designer whose work spans master planning, urban design, group housing, and hospitality projects across the country. He founded Kapadia Associates in the year 1991, and over the years, the practice has grown into one of India's leading architectural firms with offices in Mumbai, Pune, and Bangalore. A graduate of CEPT University with a Masters of Architecture in Urban Design from Harvard University, he brings to his work both design depth and urban sensitivity. His practice reflects a strong understanding of context, human experience, and the role architecture plays in shaping the identity of place. He's also remained actively engaged with academia, serving as visiting faculty and advisor at several respected institutions, which reflects his continued commitment to architectural thought and learning. Today, he will share how architecture can respond thoughtfully to environment, culture, and context, and in doing so, create spaces that feel rooted, relevant, and lasting. Please join me in welcoming architect Kiran Kapadia. A warm welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, at the outset, Alastair, enjoyed your presentation a lot of things to learn from the scale of projects that you're doing. And it's nice to see some of your work coming to India. So we look forward to that. At the outset, I'd like to thank, FOAD and Godrej Locks for, this invitation to talk. And I think this lecture series has created season 4 now. So it's created a vibrant platform for exchange of ideas about architecture and design among professionals, students, etc. So I think it's great. What I'm going to do today is to discuss, design strategies of our studio over the years through 4 built projects, actually, of varying program and scale. And I thought it would be nice to end with some personal reflections of practicing architecture for about 30 years. What I've intentionally done is to actually, I'm going to put on my slideshow now, so just to get an idea of this thing. So, one second.
Sure, sir.
कैसे करते हैं? Okay. I guess my screen is visible now. So this is just notes from the studio. So our studio is also about 35 years old. So today we live in a society based on data, human information technology, and artificial intelligence. And as these became the domain of computers, society will place new value on the one human ability that can't be automated, and that human ability is emotion. Imagination, myth, ritual make up the language of emotion. Buildings and spaces will need to thrive and connect with their users on the basis of the stories and emotions that they generate. And this has been going on for centuries. The question we need to ask is, how can we generate an architecture that goes beyond the pragmatics of program and site, an architecture that creates relationships and narratives with its occupants? How can the fictive stories of the inhabitants script the architecture while architecture scripts the stories of the same time? I like to call this narrative hybrids, architecture that is composed of multiple simultaneous stories that unfold throughout the buildings we create. Our buildings have to tell a story, and the building that has the best story wins. What's your story? What I'm presenting today is a journey through 4 projects which are presented in a chronological order. These projects vary in terms of program, site, and scale, and these projects represent a humble attempt to articulate the issues that concern us. The first project is a kind of an apartment building located in downtown Mumbai. It's called Vasant Vilas, built in 2004. It's in a kind of a strong urban context. It's located in the inner city along a main, very, very busy road. And it is like an urban insert, actually, that comes in within within a strong urban context. And we're responding to the site and to the idea of an apartment building within very, very tight constraints, which you will see. So it's essentially kind of looked at in section where you have parking and services located below, and then we have kind of apartments located on 6 upper levels. So there are apartments of different sizes for tenants, and then up on top are 3 levels for the owners themselves. And then since it's a very tight site, we've located a pavilion on the terrace, which becomes a kind of a community space for the entire building because there's no space available on the ground. So that's the plan of the building. So, the front edge that you see is a kind of a strong urban edge, restrained, very, very controlled, stone clad. And then the rear edge becomes, as the building kind of goes towards the end, it becomes more fluid and kind of, flows with the idea of kind of a strong load bearing wall in the front versus a kind of a fluid concrete wall at the back. And all the spaces seem to open more at the back rather than the front. So the public functions are all located at the back, while some of the bedrooms which require smaller windows, etc., are located in the front. That's the section through it. So they've got 3 apartments at the upper level, and then you've got a kind of a 3 levels for the family themselves who are the owners, with a courtyard that connects the 3 levels together, with a roof terrace, which is a community space for the entire building. And that's the view of the building from the main road. So you can see the restrained kind of a facade along the front, with kind of narrow punched openings, deep recesses, solid walls which cut the noise and also the insulation from the road, and up on top the pavilion, which is the community space expressed as a kind of a clear element up on top. again, another view of that. So this is natural local stone that's been used with these kind of small balconies that kind of respond to the street. It's a kind of a way of, talking to the cities. That's what we're interested in, actually. And, going into details of actually, designing the actual, interface and even the signage and things like that. It's all kind of built into our kind of, language of building together. And then the rear facade that you really see is far more fluid and expressive of the program that lies at the back, kind of a thing. And you can see these kinds of elements that capture views of the city, which you will see in some of the interior views. Some interior shots of the building, which you can see the solidity in the front and the fluidity at the back, where the living spaces open out and the natural light that it brings in. And again, this is what I was talking about, where views are captured of the city, framed views of the city beyond. And you can see, Nariman Point and the roofs of the old buildings around, and light pouring into the space. And that's the courtyard, which extends for the owner apartments over 3 levels, actually. So you can see this thing control, where the outside materials again come in. So what we've used on the outside, the stone comes into the courtyard and comes in, and with north light coming out, naturally ventilated courtyard with windows opening out. And that's the pool at the top, which has got a community space. It's got a small community room and a pool with a terrace. So that's the community space for the entire building, since there's nothing available on the ground. So this has been kind of transferred at the roof level. So you enjoy the city views from here. The next project that I'm going to talk about is actually slightly different scale again. This is a campus that we designed for Hindustan Unilever. It's a large international corporate house. And this was located again in Mumbai, in Andheri. It's a 12-acre site, which has the corporate offices for Unilever. A lot of existing trees at the site. It was their old factory, which they wanted to actually demolish and convert it into their main campus and consolidate all their locations into one place. So we obviously looked at the existing trees, and we decided, kind of devise a very different strategy. And typically an office building tends to be a big box building. People want large spaces, big box. Yeah, we've actually taken the program and divided it up into multiple kind of components. And what is interesting is that we thought that let's not make it like an office building, make it more like a public building where the community comes together. And here the community is the work community. So one of the strategies was that the parking for the occupants of the building goes below into the basement, and the visitor parking is all located to the left, as you can see on my screen. And then the buildings are kind of working around a central street, which is the most dramatic space, and it's got different functions located along the street, actually. And the street was conceived of as a public space, not like an office space. So you have public spaces at the ground level, as a media center, an auditorium, bank ATMs, a beauty salon, which is all their business, actually, a coffee shop, music store, gift shop, an ice cream parlor, a food court, etc., etc. And then up on top are really the offices and things like that. And that's the street. So it's a dramatic kind of an entrance coming in, and you see the street. So what you really get is basically, that's the heart of the campus, actually. So it's a street that you walk through, people meet and greet here, and the offices are located up on top. And then at the edge of this street are the so-called breakout spaces for the entire, all the offices. So they break out and they look out onto this street and things like that. So there's a kind of a communal aspect and doesn't look like a kind of a boring office building. And that was our intent. So all the, their laboratories, workspaces, they all open out onto the street, with public functions on the ground floor and breakout spaces at the upper levels. The street is also a transition space, linking different functions at various levels. A strong response to sustainability, where strong light coming in from the north. The entire street is non-conditioned space. It's completely naturally ventilated space coming through. And we've retained all the trees that you can see on the left and the right, on the campus. And at the end of the street, we've actually introduced a large four-storied water wall. And the water wall intention was that, it kind of, as the water comes down it creates a certain amount of kind of soft noise, ambient noise, as I would call it, which kind of completely creates an tranquil atmosphere inside and cuts away all the noisy street noise, actually, which is quite effective. So you get this water wall that kind of comes down at the end of the street. It's a termination of the street at one end. And at the other end, the street is actually, there's a kind of rotunda drum where all the conference rooms are located. So you kind of enter the street through the drum and you end the street at this kind of water wall, which kind of pulls you in with this kind of soft noise that it creates through this water wall kind of thing. And you can see the verandas that kind of open out. So it's a modern interpretation of a traditional Indian veranda. So the offices are behind and these verandas kind of open out onto the street, actually. So this is like a contemporary, modern contemporary street for an office building. So it's a kind of a new program that's kind of attached to it. And then the facades are intentionally treated very quietly where it meets the city. Again, it responds to the city in terms of scale, stone clad, and the south wall has actually got a double wall. So it's got a kind of a stone clad wall, and then it's got another wall which has got this kind of print ceramic frit. So again, it cuts the noise. This is the south facade. So it cuts the noise and it cuts the glare on the south facade. And what we've done is we printed a kind of a screen on top of that glass facade, which is the logo of the of HUL, actually. So you see that as the logo of HUL. So that's our intention is to do a very quiet kind of facade on the street, responding to the street level, both in terms of scale and discipline. And then the inside is looked at very differently, where it becomes far more vibrant and open, things like that. So that's the facade, actually. So that what you can see in the U are all various elements that are blown up onto the facade, actually. And that's the reception area, which is the drum that comes in, and all the conference rooms and meeting rooms are located within this drum. And then you come in, and then there are these kind of so-called breakout spaces that open out onto the street. That's the kind of transition space between the office and the street, and you have these internal staircases that connect various levels with skylights coming from the top. Very different program. The third project that I'm going to talk about is a school that we've done for a girls' residential school just outside of Ahmedabad in a place called Gandhinagar. It's a residential school for girls, and so it's basically, the way we did it is, again, like the idea of the street at Hindustan Lever. Here also we have a street, but this is an open street. And we wanted to make the campus quite tight because, I think, moving from one space to the other, for these girls, we wanted to make it as simple and straightforward as possible because the heat is quite a bit and it rains and things like that. So we wanted to have a covered area going through, but we've done it very, very differently. This entire street is divided into three zones. So it's got the academic zone at the entrance. We've got the social zone, which is basically the dining hall, prayer rooms, music rooms, etc., etc. And then the last bars that you see are the actual residential blocks. So there's a transition from, academic to social to residential. That's how we've kind of transitioned through the space. So that's the street, actually, that you see images of, that coming through. And these are existing trees, and there are various bridges, again, that connect different parts of the elements. So again, the idea that rather than doing a big box, we wanted to break up the scale of the buildings as much as possible to make it really feel like a city where these girls are staying, rather than having a very institutional big kind of a setup and things like that. So that's what the intent of this project was, where we've broken up the program into much smaller identifiable components that people can relate to. So as you walk down the street, you see different buildings. There's a dining hall, there's a library, there's a gymnasium, there's a sports facility, etc., as you kind of walk down the street. So the idea is that, it feels like a city rather than feeling like a large institutional campus where these girls are staying. Another image of that, and people walking down the street, they go to the classrooms, they come back home in the evening with some other facilities in the middle. So that's what we've really done. So again, this is what I meant, that these are existing trees that have been retained and built into this so-called, street all the way through. Also, what is interesting is that sustainability becomes a very, very important component of this project, where we've got, again, just a few quick images going through it. But, we've got this kind of, veranda that connects all the buildings together. So it's a kind of a low-slung veranda. So, rather than covering the street, we actually have this veranda that covers which connects all the blocks together. So students can go from one building to the other, because in the sun in Ahmedabad can get very, very strong, and it becomes very difficult in the summer months, and it does rain for a few months. So the idea is that this covered veranda kind of, again, it's a modern interpretation of a traditional Indian element veranda. And again, we've used a lot of jalis as screens, which are quite apparent in the project that you can see. The veranda is intentionally low, slung, and kind of hugs you to the ground kind of thing. It's got a very human scale, while the street outside, which we've created, is got a much more grander, kind of a bigger scale. Again, the veranda element wrapping up the public areas. And again, what we've done here, sustainability becomes an important component, where we've actually got these kinds of chimneys that actually take the hot air outside. So these verticals that you see are actually chimneys which take the hot air from within the spaces and kind of exit it out onto the terrace up on top. Again, the idea of using screens, on the south side. The south has got a deep veranda, and the north is where the classrooms face. So again, passive design strategies become important component of the building itself and things like that. So you can see the deep veranda at the south of the building. And the last project I'm going to really discuss is a very different program. It's a corporate training center for a company in India called Pidilite. They make Fevicol, for some of you who may know this. And this is a recently completed project. Very different challenge. It's a 5-acre site, and they wanted to create a training center for the company. 500 trees on site. So we were asked that we should retain most of the trees and the contours of the site. So we kind of respected that tremendously. So it was more or less kind of to really break up the program into smaller components, again, rather than doing a big building. So these smaller blocks can twist and turn around based on the location of the trees and stuff like that. So this was really about minimizing the disruption of trees, reduce cutting and filling to a minimal extent. So it really feels that this kind of a campus, residential campus learning center is located kind of, within a forest, honestly speaking. So that's some of the sections where we've kind of allowed the land to kind of dictate what we really do, huge overhangs to kind of control the sun and the rain, etc. And that's what the campus looks like. These are all existing trees for hundreds of years, and we've kind of really wrapped the building around these existing trees and things like that. So you can see this, that's the periphery, and you can see these building residential units located within this kind of verdant, kind of luxurious landscape all through. And this is what we meant by, really kind of allowing the land to dictate how we locate the buildings. So the buildings twist and turn, and they kind of move around with verandas connecting, singly loaded verandas, connecting the different blocks together, that kind of thing. So that's the kind of, so you have just 4 rooms. It's not done like a traditional hotel, but it's just got 4 rooms. You go either half a level up, half a level down, and that's how you kind of enter the rooms and things like that. And that's the learning center, actually, where you have the conference rooms, teaching classrooms, etc., and the entrance area. Some couple of interior shots of how we've kind of really articulated some of the interiors, and light coming into the public areas. So that's the 4 projects that I want to discuss, and I would like to end the talk on a personal note. I started running late in life at the age of 47, when most people think of slowing down. And I think I've learned a lot about architecture through running regularly. I run marathons, and running marathons is definitely not about the competitive spirit. It's about reaching the goals you set for yourself. The same can be said about architecture. There is no such thing as winning or losing. What's important is whether your building attains the standards you have set for yourself. Similar to running marathons, the architect has a quiet inner motivation that doesn't seek validation from the outside world. Running has definitely influenced my architectural practice. These are practical physical lessons. How much can I push myself? How much rest is appropriate? How much effort can I endure? How far can I take an idea and still keep it decent and consistent? How much should I be aware of the world outside? and how much should I focus on my inner world? To what extent should I be confident in my abilities, and when should I start doubting myself? These are questions I ask myself. Exerting yourself to the fullest within your individual limits, that's the essence of long distance running and a metaphor for my architectural practice. Thank you.
I'm sure, sir, all of us in the audience members are also actually applauding like this. Thank you so very much. Actually, I feel that the entire presentation was set in three steps, three phases rather. It started with how you started with setting the context through your journey and storytelling, and then you showed the amazing works, and of course the end, which honestly none of us were expecting, was this beautiful, encouraging narrative that you just shared, that how you've related running with the profession that you are in. So thank you very, very much for encouraging us. And yes, all right, ladies and gentlemen, on that encouraging note, thank you once again to Architect Kiran and Architect Alastair for such lovely, amazing works. What both presentations remind us is that architecture becomes most powerful when it does more than solve a requirement. It becomes powerful when it shapes relationships between people and place, between movement and meaning, between and identity. Today's topic, building identity, not just infrastructure, asks us to think beyond utility alone. It asks how architecture can create belonging, memory, and long-term cultural value. Let's explore a few ideas together before we move into the audience Q&A and the poll question. So if I can request both of our guests, in case you want to share something with each other or ask anything, this is the time. Over to you. Anyone can start.
Maybe I will. I mean, it's beautiful to see, obviously, the context of your work, Kiran. I suppose from my point of view, sitting outside of India and having visited your wonderful country many, many times, I see a beautiful sort of tradition of architecture there that I see in your work from Doshi and Corrigan and through to yourself and others. How do you view the sort of notion of international architecture and the influence of international architecture in India?
So I think, I look at it two ways. So I think it's a very welcome thing, because what happens is that, people are getting international architects like yourselves for specialized projects, which we have very little experience on, honestly speaking. So sports, entertainment architecture, the scale that you talk about is very, very, it's new to India, relatively speaking. And, I think getting an exposure to what the world is doing is really, really important. Similarly, when we do office buildings and stuff like that, the same thing comes through. So, we are living in a kind of a global culture. I think the challenge really becomes is, how do you kind of, respond to globalization while keeping local elements in mind. So I think having international architects coming in and working here, I think is a big learning experience, for Indian architects. Actually, I welcome it tremendously. We worked with a few of them, and we worked as team members, on some projects, and we continue to work with some of the leading architects of the world. So, and I think it's really a welcome thing. I've learned a lot, from working with international architects, actually. Because the language, in a certain sense, is very, very similar. So the challenge for international architects is how they respond to the Indian context, and for Indian architects is to get into thinking of some of the leading international architects based on their pedigree and what they've learned and stuff like that. So I think it's fascinating exchange of ideas, which only gets the whole project richer, according to me.
I find the rich mix of culture fascinating, and I think to commend you still, and I hope India never loses it, is the skill of the craftsman is still very much in what you put together. Unfortunately, in a lot of places in the world, we don't have those skills anymore, and it's a joy to actually work with craftsmen over there on the delivery of the projects in Ahmedabad at the moment.
Yeah, and I think what is interesting is that, while, it's in India, it's not a luxury to work with craftsmen, because I think it's a necessity, because I think it also keeps trades alive, that kind of thing. And not only happening in architecture, it's happening in the textiles, it's happening everywhere, where I think there's so many people in India. We have a problem of too many people, and you have to keep these skills alive. And a lot of these skills are just translated from one generation to the other through word of mouth. And, it's like a generational thing, whether it's music or whether it's textiles, or whether it's craftsmanship in architecture and things like that. It's quite. It's a challenge. It's not dying away. I think it's how we interpret it and contemporize it to make it relevant in today's buildings. Actually.
Yes. Architect Kiran, in case you have any question from Architect Alastair.
Yeah, I just, the kind of scale that you deal with is quite amazing with these. I mean, I've seen some of these buildings that, these stadiums and things like that. And, I've noticed that all over the world, these stadiums, entertainment centers are now becoming ways of rejuvenating the city. Actually, a lot of cities are taking it upon themselves that these cultural landmarks, like what the town hall used to be in the earlier days, the city center, these buildings are being looked at because they're just so big in scale, mixed use. As he said, you've got hotels, you've got entertainment, you've got restaurants, F&B, and the sports, all coming to rejuvenate parts of the city. And how do you? I just want to understand how the interaction between, there's something that is missing here, is how does the city interact with professionals like you? Because the responsibility is on the city, because I think this brings a lot to the economy of the city also, I guess, these large-scale projects.
You are quite right. Here in Australia, they are often used as public rejuvenation projects, and I've had the pleasure of working on them. A lot to do with essentially brownfield sites, the reclamation of brownfield sites. The Hobart Stadium is exactly that. It was blighted by industrial revolution, contaminated with oil tanks, and now it's being rejuvenated back into a place that we can use for the public good. So that is part of a whole rejuvenation project for the waterfront, the Salamanca Cove waterfront in Hobart. It's also geared, of course, around this notion of pilgrimage. Fans come to these venues, almost like in a pilgrimage, to come to the venue. So the venues act as a great sense of civic pride when designed correctly as well. And what we've seen more and more now is that these venues become more and more open. So the city engages to them both inside and outside to allow them to actually integrate, so they're no longer a fortress, a building that turns its back on the city. More, it opens into the city and embraces with the city. The success of Adelaide Oval transformed the city centre there dramatically. Within the first year of opening, over 600 new bars and restaurants opened as a result of the increased trade coming into the Adelaide Oval. So these are amazing elements of rejuvenation for the city that create activity for the city, not just on the event days, but actually 365 days a year.
And how proactive is the city government in dealing with these kinds of projects?
In Australia, our projects are funded by either the city or the state governments. So very, very active. We do now have more and more PPPs or PFIs, sort of public-private partnership models, which are coming to play because, like all cities only have a certain amount of money, but they want public infrastructure. Within the PPP market, we're seeing some very successful global businesses begin to partner with cities in the delivery of this infrastructure that can't necessarily be afforded by the local taxpayers. And here in Melbourne, Marvel Stadium is one of those such projects. Optus Stadium was funded essentially by the private sector as well in Perth. So this combination between public and private sector is becoming more, particularly in this building typology.
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much for such an interactive session. Now, can we move forward? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
So before we move on to the question and answer session, I'm sure all our audience members are quite excited to know the answers of what the questions they've asked. But before that, quickly, like I mentioned earlier, we'll have a quick poll question. This activity is for the audience members. So there are 2 poll questions that I'm going to ask the audience members one by one. Each question will have 4 options. I'm going to take 30 seconds for the audience members to quickly go and vote to the best option that they deem fit. So yes, without further delay, let's quickly start with our first poll question. The question is, when you think of architecture creating identity, what matters most? To understand how architecture can go beyond function, that's the first option. To learn from Indian and global perspectives. To explore public, urban, and institutional design. context and connection to place, public experience and movement, materiality and spatial character, or long-term cultural value. So the question is, when you think of architecture creating identity, what matters most? Context and connection to place, public experience and movement, materiality and spatial character, and last is long-term cultural value. The time starts now, 30 seconds, requesting all our audience members to quickly go and vote to the option that they feel fit for this particular question. All right, we are about 15 seconds to go. Quickly requesting all our audience members, each vote that you give really counts, because that's when we'll come to know what is the majority of options, whichever option has got the majority votes. So yes, 5 seconds to go. All right, my team says time's up. And the first option, which is context and connection to place, is what has got the major votes. So yes, when you think of architecture creating identity, what matters most is context and connection to place. So yes, thank you so much to our audience members. Let's quickly move on to the next poll question. And the question is, what drew you most to today's session? The question is, what drew you most to today's session? To understand how architecture can go beyond function, to learn from Indian and global perspectives, to explore public, urban, and institutional design, and lastly, for inspiration and design insights. So requesting the time starts, requesting our audience members to quickly go and vote. It's very important. This question is also very important for us as a team, so that next time we come with more interesting and more amazing content for all of you. So yes, we're about 15 seconds to go. What drew you most to today's session? 4 options. Quickly requesting our audience members. All right, 5 seconds to go. All right, time's up. The option is, that's to learn from Indian and global perspectives. It was so, I think you could just sense it with the guests that we have today and the variety of work that they have showed us. So yes, a big thank you to both our speakers for sharing your works with us. All right, now let's quickly move on to the Q&A session. We'll start with architect Alastair, and the question is from Mr. Bhargav Bhavsar. He's asked, indoor cricket stadium, is the indoor cricket stadium air conditioned? How you have taken care for sustainability for the same?
So the Hobart Stadium is not air conditioned. It's fully naturally ventilated. A complex process of CFD modeling was done to encourage air movement through the building with openings on the prevalent wind conditions, and then using the thermal heat stack essentially through the top of the roof with vents to actually vent the roof out. What was interesting more of as a complex issue was the first time of how to deal with shadows that actually cast over the wicket block. And we spent 6 months investigating that particular problem to get the Cricket Australia and the ICC comfortable that the shadow issue was actually covered. So there's no problem with heat, and it is naturally air conditioned. It's naturally ventilated.
Lovely. Thank you so much. The next question is for Architect Kiran. Someone's asked, how do you balance contemporary design aspirations with the cultural and environmental realities of a site?
I think, I don't think they are both, they're not mutually exclusive. I think they're mutually inclusive. So I think, I think responding to the site is an important element. And then, I think, the program, whatever the program is, and you've noticed whether it's a, different kind of program. So how the site and the program comes together in a meaningful way, I think is extremely, extremely critical. So I find that, responding to site and program are both key ingredients of, how you can do and how you interpret it and stuff like that. So as you've seen a lot of our work, our tendency is to break down the program as much as possible. So then you get these kind of connecting spaces, which actually where really architecture takes place, I feel, beyond the program kind of thing. So I think that's our strategy. So, the street at HUL, which is a contemporary office building, the linear street at the school is another way of looking at it. So I think the whole idea is that how to really interpret the program in relation to the site, I think becomes very, very critical, actually.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll move on to architect Alastair. Someone's asked, in your experience, what makes public infrastructure emotionally memorable for people?
To my mind, it's two components, and I love going to a new venue when it opens, and I call it the wow factor. When we have people, 30,000 people coming into a building, and they stop at that moment when they enter the building and kind of go, "My gosh, this is amazing." And then watching them enjoy the game. You know, the great thing about sport and entertainment is it brings people together from all walks of life to cheer for your team, to shout at the umpires, to rally around the songs of connection. These all bring people together. So to my mind, the biggest thing that these buildings actually create is bringing communities together. And it's those components that are really, really important. Architecturally, that's atmosphere. Architecturally, it's really important these buildings fit within the context that they're built. That's why we do not believe in a cookie cutter. We believe that every building has to respond to context, regionalism, identity, and the issues that actually make that ground something unique for that community.
Absolutely, well said. Thank you so much. We move on to architect Kiran. It says, what role do climate, movement, and landscape play in shaping the identity of a project?
Very important. I think climate, I think all three play very important roles. I think climate, in how you respond to climate, especially a lot of our buildings tend to be non-conditioned buildings in India, except office buildings. All our residential buildings are completely naturally ventilated and things like that. So I think, climate, how you orient the building, how you respond to the wind. We don't have the cold to respond to, at least in most of India, except really up north. But otherwise, how you respond to wind flows and wind movement, how you respond to the sun movement. In our case, hiding, from the sun. That's why deep verandas, shaded spaces become very, very important, because we live in a hot climate, sometimes hot and humid, sometimes hot and dry, and sometimes hot and hot. So that becomes a challenge. So I think responding to climate is an important factor. And I think movement then becomes very, very important as to how you kind of, move between buildings and things like that. So I think all the three components, play an important, and then how you articulate these thoughts through with the use of material, color, texture, etc. I think that makes the kind of project come together, honestly speaking.
All right, thank you. So we'll take one last question for both of you. And before we wrap up, so the question is for architect Alastair. Someone's asked, how do you balance international benchmarks in sports architecture with the local culture and character of a place?
That's a very good question. I mean, the biggest component, first off, is what do the codes require? The codes are global in most sports. Australian rules is obviously local to Australia, but cricket, football, rugby are international codes. In terms of benchmarking, we learn a lot from around the world. And the element that we do here in Australia is we synthesize it. The best way to describe Australia is that we're sort of the last station on the line in the global sense. So our element of global exposure means that we've always got to travel somewhere a long way. It's a 14-hour flight to India, for example. So what we have a tendency to do is that we're great travelers. And when we go to a city, we observe and we absorb those components within it. In sports, I've had the joy of watching sports all the way around the world. I've seen how sports are being commercialized. I've seen how safety plays different components within the games. I've seen how the experience economy has evolved into what was essentially originally, the pavilion for rich people and the masses into a crowd, to areas now where we have experiences, about 20 different ranges of experience for everyone within the stadium. And so we've seen this evolve as a direct result of observations around the world. In Australia, though, we're very democratic in relation to the way that we engage with sport. My observation, for example, in the US is it's very commercialized and very expensive. And I think the element for us is that sport has to be something that the masses can still enjoy, but have the opportunity to enjoy a range of different offerings, a range of different opportunity that actually allows the whole of community together. So we always look at this by benchmarking around the world. We always look at what are the latest things going on. but we try and synthesize what's the best to create something new rather than copy.
All right, thank you. So, Architect Kiran, I'm going to take two quick questions because they both are sort of talking about the same thing, but they're two different gentlemen asking the question. So we'll start with the first one. It says, who inspired or who are your mentors through your journey of architecture, connecting contemporary to modern architecture, taking with social aspects from Indian society? That's the first question. And the second is that do you get inspired by architect Charles Correa and architect Louis Kahn? You have your own style, and do you think we must go back to this kind of sustainable work for future of India with such heat climate change? Yes.
Okay, two things. So I'm obviously, influences are apparent. I studied at Ahmedabad at the School of Architecture. Doshi was my teacher, so I am influenced by Doshi and Anant Raje, who was my thesis guide. Who worked with Khan and who was Khan's kind of, on site for the IIM campus. So Raje and Doshi are obviously kind of, I've had direct interaction with them. So obviously very, very strong influence, influence to me. I am influenced by a number of other architects, and I look at the work of architects as inspiration. It's always nice to look at the work. And I also knew Charles Correa personally, being from Mumbai, and he had an office here, and I've met him a few times. And obviously, he was a great thinker. Great ideas, great projects. And I think for him, really, the kind of varied nature of work, right from city planning, which he worked for Navi Mumbai, to museum projects of how he interpreted Indian culture in a very contemporary manner. And he was the first architects who did a really nice, multi-storied residential building in Mumbai, which is an interpretation of the veranda and the Kanchenjunga apartment. So Charles is obviously a great thinker and a phenomenal architect. So I am influenced by him. Whether I have my own style, I'm not sure. I think I don't look at too much a style really. I think we don't carry too much baggage in our office. We look at the site, we look at the context, we look at the program, we listen to the client, and something comes out of it. So I don't think we kind of go into a project saying that we want it to look in a certain manner or something of that sort. I think it's more a process. So we don't have a style, as you can see in the works that we've done. We've responded much more to context and stuff like that. Ahmedabad project is got exposed concrete and all, but that's a tradition there of Louis Kahn and Corbusier and Doshi and stuff like that. We wanted it to have this kind of minimalist feel. And stuff like that. And also just what was very interesting is that school project for the Swaminarayan sect, they didn't want, there's a particular sect that we've done the school for, the Swaminarayan sect, that's the school for. And they are a very austere, disciplined thing, and they didn't want any color on their buildings. So then if they don't want any color on their buildings, then we said, concrete works the best because it's a very gray, neutral color and things like that. So, so I don't think we approach a building through the notion of making it look in a certain way or having, driving a particular style. I think it's just comes what may kind of a thing.
Thank you so much for such an amazing question and answer session. I'm sure there are a lot of other questions, but because of the time not being on our side, we'll have to sort of skip the questions. But a humble thank you to our audience members for actually sharing such amazing questions. But sorry. All right, that brings us to the end of VC Live Season 4, Episode 1. Thank you so much to our incredible speakers, Architect Alastair Richardson and Architect Kiran Kapadia, for sharing your insights, perspectives, and processes with all of us today. And of course, a big, big thank you to our audience members for joining us live as we begin this new season under the theme Beyond the Blueprint. Today's session reminds us that architecture is never just about what gets built. It is also about what gets shaped along the way: identity, experience, memory, and meaning. The most lasting projects are not only the ones that perform well, they are the ones that come to stand for something, for a place, for a community, for a culture, and for a way of imagining the future. Until next time, stay curious, keep questioning, and continue designing with purpose. Thank you very much. Please take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thrusters.
Check. Door lock check.
Door lock. घर का डोर लॉक किया था या भूल गया? भूल गया। घर का लॉक फटाफट से चेक करके आऊं क्या?
ले आइए गोदरेज IoT 9 डिजिटल लॉक, 9 सिक्योर एक्सेस मोड्स, ऑटोमेटिक लॉकिंग ट्रिपल बोल्ट और कई एडवांस फीचर्स। अब घर के अंदर या बाहर रहो बेफिक्र।
घर जाते ही गोदरेज डिजिटल लॉक लगवाऊंगा।
Welcome to the Godrej Value Co-Creators Club, where innovation meets collaboration. GVCC is a unique platform for architects and interior designers to merge their creative visions with our innovative product offerings. We aim to cultivate a network of thought leaders, driving innovation and excellence in the industry. Celebrate your achievements with our GV's Awards, recognizing innovative projects across various verticals. Join our community through exhibition visits and masterclasses to stay updated on the latest trends and technologies. Enjoy exclusive access to new products, special discounts, and tours of our Mumbai and Goa plants. Join the Godrej Value Co-Creators Club today. Be part of a community that values innovation, collaboration, and sustainability.